Did you bring a landline phone to college?
I did not.
Okay.
I feel like we were past that. At least I was. I don't know if I just read you.
No, it's fine. I mean, I think I asked that question knowing that no one else has ever said yes. And despite the fact that I started college in 2008, I brought a landline phone to my dorm room.
Hello, and welcome to Can't Let It Go, a show about the things stuck in our heads. My name's Matt, and I use he, him pronouns.
I'm AC. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm coming to you live from inside of my partner's closet.
It looked like you were having trouble moving your arms to open documents earlier.
So, yeah, I'm in okay, I live in Washington, D.C. I live in a very small apartment in Washington, D.C. Our bedrooms are small enough that a queen size bed and distance for you to walk on either side of it fits. So it's 8 by 10. It's very small. So right now, my setup is my butt is in the closet. There is a chair in front of me holding my laptop. And then immediately on the other side of the chair, which is touching my chest, is my bed. So here I am squished in just for you for both audio quality and chaos in my house reasons today. Yeah. So excited to be here with you, Matt. What are we talking about today? Oh,
today we're talking about Garfield Phone Beach, which, like I said before, is 3 words smashed together that meant nothing to me until I realized they made Garfield-shaped phones for a while.
Yes, yeah.
And I assume it has to do with that.
It does, yeah. The Garfield Phone Beach. I asked you what we were talking about, but it's my turn to tell you about the Garfield Phone Beach.
Before we get into it, I wanted to tell the folks that we have a little bit of a programming note. So we've got this episode, and then next week we have a really big special episode.
Well, 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks for next episode.
Yes. Yeah. Next episode, not next week. 2 weeks from now, we have a really big special episode that we're extremely excited about. And frankly, if you want to hear more about it, or if you want to participate in some teasing fun about what it might be, you should definitely join the Discord.
Hey.
We had some fun with the question episode, and definitely going to try and repeat that fun with this one.
Yeah.
But after that episode's going to be the last of this season.
Yeah.
And we're going to come back at some point. We'll have a date for you, hopefully next episode. If not, again, join us in the Discord. We'll let you know when. But AC and I are both going through a lot right now in terms of just what's taking up our time. I'm moving across the country to be closer to AC.
Yeah. I mean, not just to be closer to me. I mean, it's a big perk, but
yes, it is a big perk.
And I just I've got some big changes going on at work right now that I'm really excited about. I think it's we've got so many moving parts in our lives right now to coordinate that we want to make sure that we're showing up for this podcast as best we can. So we're taking a little break and we'll be back. I think our hope is late spring, early summer. Yeah. But we'll be back with a specific date. We'll share it in the Discord first, but then also on all our social channels. We've got one more episode after this. Like Matt said, going to be a banger. And yeah, I just want to say, Matt, I'm so glad we get to make this show together. It's so fun.
Yeah. I appreciate it was our birthdays recently, but specifically we
Indeed.
rescheduled for my birthday.
Yes.
And I appreciate that, even though it is very difficult to change the schedule right now, we were both cool, we're making this happen.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think it's it's cool and fun to make stuff with your friends, and it's cool and fun to be I'm making stuff with my friends, and therefore it's low stakes and we can make the choices that are good for us. And also we both want to be making this. So we're both figuring out how to make it work. And we're really happy that all of you are listening, because that's really what makes it extra fun for us, because we're making it with each other, but also with all of you.
Yeah, absolutely. So in searching my brain for a little nugget for the show today, I thought which I often do. What is the thing that I currently cannot let go of?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the answer was this video game called Balatro. I have become this game's, I feel #1 booster. It is it looks like a poker game. You are playing poker hands, but it is one of a very common genre of video game these days called roguelike deck builders, which those words probably don't mean a ton to a lot of people, but...
Well, but we defined them in our Marvel Snap episode.
Yeah, that's right. We talked about deck builders. Did we talk about roguelikes where it's like run based and it's random and changes all the time?
Maybe I'm remembering a conversation where you explained to me what roguelike is because I play Hades and I wanted to learn more about
There you go.
that type of game. But yeah.
Yeah, so if you've played Hades, then you know. Like, but imagine that smashed up with like Magic or Marvel Snap. Like, that's basically what these are. And it's a very popular kind of game and a game that I play a lot of. But Balatro is that based on poker, and it's so good. I actually did a video on it and Marvel Snap and why I like that style of game better, like Balatro style of game better, because it's not competitive and annoying and it kind of doesn't make me feel the gross toxic things that competitive online games make me feel. And anyway, it came out today. For real.
Cool.
I've been playing the demo and just been excited about the demo for a long time. And was really lucky to get a code from NBZ, who works for PlayStat Games, the publisher of the game. He sent me a code on my birthday, which was very kind of him.
Nice.
And yeah, anyway, I'm excited to go buy it on Switch and play it on Switch after this because now it's available there.
Are you going to stream any of it? Like, are you going to...
I did actually yesterday. So you know this, but to folks in the Discord, we've got the video alerts channel there that has largely been the Into the Aether folks streaming, and we're kind of expanding that space to be all of TWG. So you might see me in there, you might see Chase or David, hell, you might see, Kim from Frog of the Week in there. Who knows?
I could stream a game, Matt.
You could do it. You could stream whatever you want.
I don't know how to do that. You could teach me.
I'll help you when I live close to you.
Okay. Oh yeah, hey, maybe AC and Matt play some games. Streams coming to you. That is like a thing that could happen now that we'll be living in the same place.
I would absolutely do an in-person Hades stream with you. That'd be rad.
It's just me cursing the entire time. Going, fuck, I'm gonna die. Oh shit. I'm gonna die. No, this time for real.
Yeah. All right. Well, you want to tell me about Garfield Phone Beach?
Okay, yes. And Matt, I want to start like this with, there are a few things on the top of my mind when I've been thinking about what this episode for Garfield Phone Beach should sound like. And the first is like, this story, I want to preface this by saying this story is something that touches on so many parts of like my life and my interests, and is like very connected to parts that are like fundamental about me that we haven't really talked about on the pod. And so I want to indulge in some of that like context as much as I can without making it like the boring AC show. And I wanted to start us out with a question that is the question that has made this like cemented, the Garfield Phone Beach cemented in my mind forever, which is, Matt, what is somewhere, anywhere in the world that you really want to visit just to see it with your own eyes? Not because it's like interesting or notable or like famous or whatever, but there's something out there that you just really want to visit to see it with your own eyes. What is that for you?
I already know the answer to this. It is kind of famous, but it's Kuroizawa in Japan, purely because of Terrace House. Like purely because of Terrace House opening new doors. And in fact, Jonathan and I are planning a trip to Japan and like trying to figure out how feasible it is to visit Kuroizawa.
Yeah. See, okay. I love that. That's not the answer that I expected at all. Someone asked me this question. In fact, my mom, my partner, and I were in a conversation several years ago, and this question was like the question that came up. And for me, the answer, without thinking about it in the same way, immediately I knew my answer. It was Garfield Phone Beach. Okay. And I think it's because this was around the time that the story about there was like a big news moment around the story in 2019 that I'll get to, like what that reveal is. It's the mystery was solved, basically. But I want to give you the context of like what the Garfield Phone Beach is and why I'm fascinated with it. So you are right. It starts with the Garfield phone. So you remember novelty phones? Did you have a novelty phone in high school?
We didn't have a novelty phone at all. No.
Did you bring a landline phone to college?
I did not. I feel like we were past that. At least I was. I don't know if I just read you.
No, it's fine. I mean, I think I asked that question knowing that no one else has ever said yes. And despite the fact that I started college in 2008, I brought a landline phone to my dorm room with me. It was a Little Mermaid phone, just because it was funny and like one of the only landline phones that I could find in the store in 2008, because landline phones weren't really like a thing anymore.
They were
even
like
by that
at
point.
the end of dying.
Yeah. So like you would have them for your parents' house and the office, but not your dorm room, right?
Right.
And I think like both hipster-y and also just like sort of generally misguided on what is appropriate. I've always been really into landline phones. And, you know, I didn't grow up in the right era for that. I actually don't even really like talking on the phone. I actually like am notoriously, I don't like talking on the phone. I answer the phone for a limited number of people. I'm that person. But I don't know, just something about the landline phone has always been alluring to me. And I do really like, I mean, something else that is true about me is that I really love novelty items, just in general. I love going to the thrift store. I love weird old stuff. And not even just generally weird old stuff. Like, I really like things that clearly once had a very specific utility, right? Like the home phone is a thing that is a cultural icon that existed for such a short period of time, but was so vastly changed the day-to-day life of the average American household that it is memorialized forever in TV and movies, right? And like there's so much interesting stuff. Like, I don't know, Matt, how much time like you spend with kids or like what you know about this, but have you seen this like gesture that's coming around that they're talking about, like Gen Alpha is doing, like, oh, when they're done talking to you and they do this?
No.
Okay, it's like because they're like scrolling by you. They're like, I want to scroll past whatever it is you're saying.
Whoa, what?
And like moving your finger up and down like that, right? Or if you ask a kid, like you see a kid now doing play at home, they might hold their hand up to their face like this, like holding a phone, instead of doing the thumb fingers phone, right?
That one I've seen and heard.
So those kinds of gestures, right? Like, I think still, right, the phone is like a very important thing in people's lives, telephones, but the specific experience of like the landline phone, right, is in and of itself like a nostalgic, almost timeless, but not timeless, very time bound experience, right? It's something that you, me, and everyone we know probably has the experience of like, oh yeah, we had a landline phone when I was growing up, right?
Yeah. I think you feel about landline phones similar to the way that I feel about cassette tape players.
Matt, you know, I have a cassette tape tattoo, okay? Yes, I love cassette players. I love record players and 8-tracks and laser discs. Oh my God. My favorite thing when I was in middle school was watching the movie Murder by Death on Laserdisc with my best friend who owned 2 Laserdiscs. It was Murder by Death and Titanic.
I didn't realize they put Titanic on Laserdisc.
Yeah, baby. So, yeah, I just generally like novelty phones, novelty items, and I really do like the kitsch of it, right? And in this way, I'm also often thinking about it now, right? In the last 5 years, thinking more and more about like the ways in which culture is being flattened and like the ways in which people are always looking to seem more like one another, right? And so like these novelty phones, you know, yeah, the Garfield telephone may have been a hot item among young people in like the late 70s and 80s. I don't really know. I wasn't alive then, and I didn't do the like deep dive to figure out if this was actually a cool thing to own then or not, right? But like, I think it was like, oh, did you have a novelty phone? Which one was it? Because there were many different ones, right? And it was less about ubiquity of form, right? They're not all the same iPhone that people are chasing after. The coveted item is a novelty phone that represents something that you like or are interested in. It's a basketball, it's a lips, it's a soccer ball, it's
the hamburger.
Oh my God, the hamburger one from Juno. Matt,
Yeah.
maybe Yeo just unlocked. Maybe that's where it comes from for me, that I just love novelty phones.
Yeah. Juno is absolutely like my reference point. I mean, I realized that they were like on TV and in movies before that, but like that was really culturally relevant to us as teens.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So then there's another part of my life that you need to know about, to know like why this is a story that would have crossed my radar sooner than its big news moment, which is that when I was in college, I got my undergraduate degree in environmental sociology. So, yes, the rumors are true. I'm never beating the dirty hippie allegations. If you met me at that point in my life, I was like, part of it is that I like am a rule follower. And so sometimes people feel surprised to like learn this about me. But I was like as much of a hippie and a rule follower as you could be, which is actually surprisingly like pretty hippie culture. Hippies like rules. And I grew up in a hippie household. I got this environmental sociology degree. I really thought that the thing that I was going to do was like go into environmental sociology research, be a writer, be a researcher about how people relate to the environment around them, have relationships with environmental disasters, how they're impacted by it, all of that kind of stuff, right? And so when I was a senior in college, I don't know if you remember this, I wrote a paper about consumable plastic products. And so this is in 2011. I was writing this paper about single-use plastic and like the myth of recycling. So this is at a time when recycling is at its peak of popularity, and there's not as much knowledge, like it's less culturally known that like a lot of recycling centers are actually just throwing stuff into landfills, right? Everything that you put into the recycling bin is not getting recycled, but there are these big pushes around recycling as the answer to all of our problems. Again, this is like 15 years ago. It's not it's not where the discourse is now, but it was really important to me then. So I was often following stories about plastic waste. You know, the great garbage patch was just coming into not like common knowledge, right? I think this is around the time when I was in college, is around the time when people are starting to do like the kayaking across the ocean to reveal the great plastic garbage patch, the size of Texas, you know. Anyway, so all of that is like context you need about me before I give you the context that you need about the Garfield phone page.
I very remember the plastic use stuff you did. I think it was actually before we met. If I recall correctly.
There are two different things that happened. So one is I did a project before we met in class that was like the assignment was like, you should do something to reduce your overall consumption in some way, to change your lifestyle for 1 month. And the problem was that the big three suggestions were measure your energy output, like based on your energy bill, and try to reduce your footprint by a certain amount, your like energy use by a certain amount over the next month. Be a vegetarian for a month, and don't drive your car for a month. And here are some small facts about me at that time in my life. I lived on campus and I did not have an energy bill. I was already a vegetarian and I did not own a car. Yep. So I was like, cool, I can't do any of those things. What can I do? And what I came up with was, for 1 month, I did not use consumable plastic products. Or more accurately, for 1 month, I cataloged every instance where I tried to refuse a single-use plastic item and I could not refuse it. So like examples were pill bottles, right? Like over-the-counter medications at the pharmacy. Like there aren't options to get things in glass bottles or to get individual pills dosed out to you in an envelope or like some non-plastic alternative. You know, at the grocery store, you're buying boxes that are closed with plastic glue or have plastic windows, right? Like that. To truly go plastic free is a very difficult thing, was what I was trying to illustrate. Right. And then for a capstone project senior year, I wrote a much bigger research paper about that.
Didn't know that part.
Yeah, that was that semester that I took like no classes and I just worked all the time.
Maybe.
It was like it was winter 2011. Mitch, friend of the pod who was on the podcast, he and I took a class together. It was history of medicine. I did an independent study class where I wrote this paper.
Yes.
And I took like one other class, and I mostly just worked the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's like a little bit of AC lore. So on Twitter, I don't remember, some point before 2019, I first heard about this story, which is that since the 1980s, on the shoreline of Brittany in France, which is the like tip of France that kind of points back towards the US, you know, on that western coast of France, for 30 years, since the late 1980s, Garfield phones have been washing up on the beaches of Brittany.
Washing up, like not being placed there?
No, like washing up, like they are beat up, battered. Sometimes it's small pieces. Sometimes it's just the cord. Sometimes it's just the receiver. Sometimes it's the whole phone. But for years, pieces and entire Garfield phones were washing up on this beach. And they could not figure out where they were coming from.
Huh.
And so then eventually what this really is more than a story of like, it is a story of environmental pollution, right? Eventually the internet became very interested in this mystery. And activists and community members who had spent years collecting and picking up these pieces of these Garfield phones to keep their beaches clean, start reaching out to like journalists, or journalists find them. I'm not really sure about that part, but French journalists start to pick up on the story. And in February 2019 is the first story that I can find that's published in like a reputable news outlet, which is France Info. They published this story about the Garfield phone beaches, and they're basically like, we don't know why, but here's this beach where all of these phones have been washing up. And one thing that I love about it is that this quote from that piece, which was, the phenomenon is such that the Ansel Association has included Garfield phones in the list of recurring waste on its ocean plastic tracker map. So that is to say that a specific association in like France or the EU that tracks what type of plastic people are doing, like recovering from beaches, that they recover enough of this specific phone to specifically be like, I picked up a piece of Garfield phone plastic trash on the beach today when you fill out a form.
That's wild. That's nuts.
So then in March of 2019, only a month later, right? France Info and then the New York Times, the Washington Post, all of these news agencies pick up the story. I mean, and I think like Bored Panda, right? Like this is kind of stumble upon era is like when I was finding this information initially, right? And so it's very primed for that kind of storytelling. And I'll get to that in a minute. But so this story in March 2019 comes out, and it's like, for more than 30 years, these phones have been washing up, and we solved the mystery. The mystery is solved. I will never forget watching this video. So this video involves a few things that I'm afraid of. The ocean and caves. I love the ocean and I love swimming, but I am terrified of caves. And I'm specifically terrified of ocean caves. Which is so
I feel that.
weird.
That is,
but
it's not weird. I feel it. Absolutely.
There are enough stories that I read as a child. And I also think that like I have a family member who was killed in a like tides came back in and they never heard from him again kind of way. Like he went and this is like, you know, I mean, in the 50s, like a very long time ago. But the tide rises in the cave and then there's no water in the cave and you're just underwater and there's nowhere to go, like other than out of the cave, right? It's very scary to me. So it turns out it's one of those kinds of caves where it like goes way back in. And this is another point to why I'm afraid of the ocean, because what they find in this cave is an entire shipping container full of Garfield phones that at some point in the 80s fell off of a shipping vessel, or like there was some sort of accident or wreck or whatever. It fell off of a fishing vessel. They can't find the exact whatever. And that shipping container got lodged in this sea cave. So the ocean was strong enough to pick up that container and like basically carry it into this cave. And it lands there. And then for 30 years, you know, there's like it starts to erode, pieces come out. And the reason that they are always being found all over these beaches is because essentially the cave fills with water, picks up debris, and takes that debris out of the cave with it. So that's why it's been like this slow leak over time. And then the real thing that happens that makes this a cultural phenomenon is here's from February 2021 is people tweeting things like, can't stop thinking about that French beach that keeps bringing Garfield phones from the ocean. It's literally a story of how people became fixated. There are, over the years, like 10 or 15 of these extremely viral on Twitter, viral on Reddit, viral on Tumblr posts of people saying, I can't stop thinking about the Garfield phone beach.
Does this happen like before social media at all? Because you said it's been happening for 30 years.
So I don't really know. Like, presumably they've been finding this trash since the 80s. So I think that this is a really interesting version of like, I'm sure there was like locals, right? So basically somebody was like, came to that part of France and were like, why are there Garfield phone beaches? And all the locals were like, we don't know why we're always finding Garfield phones, but like, it's a thing that's true. So it seems like something that was like a local story or like a local sort of inside joke that because of the power of the internet, right, became this larger meme, this larger story, right? I don't think this happens without either. Like, I think there's a version of this story that happens in the 80s where like somebody tells a New York Times reporter that there are Garfield phones on this beach and they figure it out, right? Like, but the version of this story that is this viral meme that keeps popping up over and over again, I think only happens with the internet, right?
Right. Looking at your notes and there's like 17 different versions of the same post.
Correct. Yes. And like notably, they all have like 50,000 engagements, 100,000 engagements. Like when I say super viral, like these are the kinds of posts that people create because they're primed to go viral, right? They're people recycling the same version of content that they're either doing it on purpose or sometimes they're doing it because they don't realize that it's something that they saw super viral years ago, right? And you're like, oh, or months ago or a few weeks ago, right? Like, and you're just regurgitating that thing that you've already read, but it seems so obscure and weird that why would anyone have posted about that, right? And so, yeah, that like memification effect is a big part of like why I am always thinking about the Garfield phone beach, because essentially this shouldn't be a fun and funny story. I mean, obviously that it's Garfield phones is part of what makes it fun and funny, right? Because it is just like, if you look at the images and you see that it's just funny to see like these Garfield phones. I guess I didn't even describe what the Garfield phone looks like for our listeners, which is that it is Garfield like laying down on his stomach and the receiver is such that when you pick it up, his eyes open, and when you close it, when you set it down, his eyes close. So
also the phone is part of his back, which just, even before Garfield Phone Beach, always felt a little body horror to me.
Yes, there is absolutely a body horror element to it. There is absolutely a like weird, like sort of cryptid almost, like a modern cryptid, right? Like, oh, the Garfield phone from the Garfield Phone Beach, right? Like you can see all of the versions of those kind of memifications of like the horrors. And then my favorite one perhaps is this tweet from someone whose display name is Shan Horan. Shan Horan Draws. They're an illustrator, and they drew like this beautiful illustration of a Garfield phone washed up on the beach that is like the headliner image of this New York Times story that goes super viral about it. And they just like paint it, and that that post has 40,000, almost 50,000 engagements from January of this year. So like this story originally goes viral in 2019. And in January of this year, someone is posting an illustration of a photo that was taken that was published in the New York Times in 2019. And it went viral with 47 or 43.7 thousand engagements, right? Like,
I feel like you told me you wanted to record this episode before that like
I
tweet
did.
happened.
I did. Right. And like, so it's this thing where like, I think like one of the other things, the reasons that I can't stop thinking about it is like, I love these kinds of truly viral, but somehow very niche stories, right? Because I've been thinking about this as a viral post on the internet for 5+ years. Mm-hmm. And you've never heard of it. And we are both extremely online, right? Mm-hmm. And like, I love that kind of thing where you're talking to someone and you're like, have you heard of the Garfield phone beach? And there are two reactions. And it's no, I've never heard of that, or absolutely yes, I know exactly what you are talking about. And I am also fascinated by it. Right. And like, that's a really exciting interaction to have.
It's an interesting way. You talked about like the flattening of culture earlier, but a way that I think culture is currently like evolving new ways to diverge, right? Is, I don't know, like niche virality, the thing that you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yesterday, to get a little, what have we been texting about segment in here? Yesterday, I texted you just like an interaction that I had on TikTok with somebody that I thought was funny. And you didn't immediately know who it was, but it's because you didn't know their username. But before I knew that, I was like, oh, it's extremely possible that this person that I'm talking to in these comments is very famous on TikTok and AC has never heard of them.
Yeah.
Right? Because that happens to me so much these days where like, I don't know, I'm obsessed with Oliver Richmond on TikTok, and he's writing a song a day every day this year, and he wrote the Punxsutawney Phil musical thing that's been going around, right? But like, it took until I said Punxsutawney Phil for you to like even know what I was talking about. And that means you've missed a whole part of like this culture of this one person, you know?
Yeah. I was like, oh, I haven't heard of that person. And then you started to describe it. And I was like, the song a day thing. I was like, oh, I remember there was that guy who posted, it was like writing one song every day. Here's my song about Punxsutawney Phil. Right. And like, that's my entry point. Right. But I think that like that kind of stuff is so interesting. And I think that like, yeah, it is possible. Like I mean, I suffer every day. I go on, so I manage I manage social media for a large brand. We have, millions of followers across all of our apps is what I'll say. And I go on our TikTok to scroll on the work account so that we get better targeted stuff for the work account. And I feel like I have no idea what's happening. I don't recognize faces. I don't recognize names. I don't recognize formats. Like, and that's less true over time as I've spent more time investing in that space there. But like, there are TikTokers who have millions of followers that I have never heard of, or like have heard of one time in a report. And I'm like, oh, I know that person exists. Right. But I think of that often like within niches, right? You're talking about like people who are famous within their niche who have 1 to 4 million followers, but outside of their niche, nobody knows who they are. Right.
Sorry, the thing that came to my head was a John Green book quote, which is some infinities are bigger than other infinities. AC has disappeared off screen as much as is possible in the tiny space they are sitting in.
I like leaned so my face was sort of hidden by the chair. Wow, Matt, so true. I almost called you John.
I also want to say like, I know we talk a lot about the Green brothers, and oh man, are they rightly, I think, getting some flack right now? And if anything, so if you don't know, they're getting a lot of flack right now because they really kind of refuse to talk about Palestine and genocide being the genocide of the Palestinian people. And I'll just say I'm owning love things and critique them. And mostly just like engaging with the stuff that I can right now. Anyway, I've been wanting to like say something about the Green brothers for a while now, because it's like It's a bummer to think about.
Yeah.
But anyway, little side moment there.
Yeah, I think I'll say it this way. There are a lot of people who are engaging in the critical discourse in a way that I think is really valuable, and the Green Brothers could stand to listen to, especially because of the ways that they've been involved in that issue in the past. And like, we don't need to repeat those things here, but you should go seek out like people who are sharing them, and I will try to find some of those videos and like share them in the Discord for, you know, people to think about if you, like us, are longtime followers of theirs.
Yeah. Anyway, niche virality. And
I mean, the Green Brothers are a great example of niche virality, right? Like people who were very popular within their niche and then moved outside of their niche and like now are responsible to a larger and larger audience and like have intentionally positioned themselves to grow in that way and haven't necessarily upheld that part of that responsibility, right? But like, anyway, so that's like a sidebar here. I've thought of a million sidebars, but I'm going to try to steer us back towards this. And like the thing that I think here that I really want to narrow in on is something, as someone who is trained as an environmental sociologist, who has spent a lot of time thinking about the ways that people like engage with disaster and crisis, is that like at its core, this is essentially making a meme out of the climate crisis, right? This is one of many of a long-standing sort of tradition of memes about the climate crisis, right? And this sort of like absurdism and nihilism that a lot of us are engaging in, thinking about, being critical of. Like some millennials hate the absurdism and the nihilism, but don't have a sense of how our own like cultural icons and like cultural moments are really hinge on that same sort of root absurdity. Even if it shows up differently. Like I think of all of the videos, like absurdist videos that you and I used to watch together, Vine as absurdism, like really key parts of millennial culture hinge around the concept of absurdism. Like
drop my croissant.
Drinking out of cups, being a bitch, right? Like
that video is fucked up. It's still so funny, but there's parts of that video that I'm like, man, we really let him get away with this.
Yeah. Yeah, and so like the like in some ways the Garfield phone beach is just like a perfect encapsulation of that, right? Of this thing that is so influential within our generation and younger generations, right? The climate crisis, and also got to make jokes about it, because like what else are we gonna do, right? What else are we, when backed into this corner, like how else do we cope with the number of disasters happening on any front of our lives in slow motion, right? And like, not that you thought that I was going to talk about the climate crisis in this episode titled Garfield Phone Beach, but
I mean, at the point where you started talking about single-use plastics, I was like, we're getting there.
Yeah. So, you know, this Reddit post, right? Like, and I think like I included this because I think that it's such a good illustration of how it's a thing that sticks in people's heads, right? Is on like an R nostalgia, or I don't remember if it was R nostalgia or like something similar to that, right? Someone posted, I wanted a Garfield phone so bad, but mom said no. And it was like a photo of the phone just out of the box, like a new Garfield phone. And someone commented and said, see, if you lived on the French coast, one would just wash up on your lawn. Right? And like, it's like, oh yeah, the cat distribution system for Garfield phones. Like, what's that like? Right? Like these little niche jokes. And so like, I think the other thing is that for every tweet that I found that has hundreds of thousands of engagements, or close to 100,000 engagements, there are countless tweets about people referencing the Garfield phone beach. If you go to like Twitter's advanced search and you look, sorry, X is advanced search, barf. And you look, it's like, this is something that people discover and rediscover and become excited about and invested in and think is funny. There is something like unique and specific to this story. And I think that like one of the things that is interesting to me about it is like a marketer could not have come up with a better or like a more well-tailored entry point to get people interested in plastic ocean waste, right? Like there is something real here that is drawing people in. And like I'm always looking for these kinds of entry points in many different facets of my life where I'm looking for something to as a way in to talk to my loved ones about something that's like otherwise a really difficult topic to start about. Like if you say to someone like, I'd like to talk to you today about climate change. Like, hey, Matt, how are you feeling about climate change today? And the answer is bad, pretty bad. I don't want to think about that, you know? Yeah. But it's like, hey, Matt, I want to talk to you about the Garfield phone beach. Do you know about it? Like, do you know why it happened? Do you know where it came from? And then like there's a natural starting place for like two directions for the conversation to go. Fun, light, funny. But there is also an opportunity without the entry point being so dire, which sometimes it needs, like sometimes it's like, please look at these dire circumstances, like right now, what many of us are doing with relation to like the Palestinian genocide, right? Like, please do not look away, right? Like we need your attention here in this moment. But in these larger sort of more nebulous cultural crises, I mean, climate crisis isn't a cultural crisis, but like these bigger crisis moments that are harder to grasp onto the specifics of like what you can do. I think of this as like a really interesting entry point. So from the article, there are these two other quotes that I really thought were very interesting. Right. The phones, they are no longer waste, but evidence, in that they are evidence of the climate crisis, right? Garfield is a strong source of interest. Beach cleanups almost turn into treasure hunts. Even my children, with whom I clean up, can't wait to find Garfield phones. And not to make it all about me again, Matt, but when I was a child, I really loved hunting for bottle caps in the dirt on the side of the road. My parents hated it because they thought I was going to get a cut and get a disease, which is, you know, as an adult, like pretty rational and pretty possible. Like that I would have gotten cut and like gotten tetanus or something like that. Right. But I really also think of it as this, like, I liked to collect bottle caps because it was something to do, but there was also something that had been taught to me of like, we pick up our trash, right? Like we clean up after ourselves. We leave a place better than we found it. You know, I was in Scouts, like all of that kind of stuff. And like, I can't help but wonder, what does it mean to leave someplace better than you found it when it comes to something like the Garfield phone beach? How do you do that kind of removal and cleanup for something like an ocean container full of Garfield phones that doesn't just pass the problem on to someone else, right? That doesn't say, instead of the Garfield phones washing up on the beaches of France, the Garfield phones now live in a landfill, disassembled for parts in a country with no protections for people who do that kind of work, you know? Right. In the US, right? It's melted down and the fumes are piped into communities that are not able to push back against those kinds of facilities being in their neighborhoods. It's called racial redlining or environmental redlining, right? Like, so like there's something very funny about this, but I've gotten very philosophical here. The Garfield phone beaches, they're about nostalgia. They're about coincidence. They're about novelty, and they're about the climate crisis and global consumption. And like, obviously, I've been pretty much just talking at you for 40 minutes at this point. And like, obviously it is something that I cannot stop thinking about, but I am going to stop talking and let you, like, what do you think now that I've given you my PowerPoint presentation about the Garfield phone beach? Matt, thoughts?
It's funny. What was I? Oh, I'm not going to say the thing was. It was more internal TWG stuff. But yeah. I posted like an essay in Discord the other day, and I was like, I guess my question is thoughts?
Thoughts?
Like, I don't know. I just have feelings and I'm putting them out into the world. But no, I think the thing you said about it potentially being a lighthearted topic, but still opening the door for deeper conversations is like the thing that I'll take away from this conversation. You know, I think you were quick to like right at the end there kind of like dance away from like the deeper implications. But I think it's important to say that like it's a real story. That is an important piece of this very funny thing. And both of those things can be true.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, like I don't necessarily think that like that's a diversion in any way from the topic at hand. The topic at hand is it's very goofy that for 30 years this has been happening. And it's also like a really clear example of the ways in which we are failing our environment, right? And the place that we live. I also, as you were talking, was like, you're right in that there's not a way to like undo the thing in a way that doesn't push the problem onto somebody else. But at the same time, for me, it's something easier to grasp onto for people to consider solutions.
Yeah.
Right. A thing that I struggle with big problems like climate change is not being able to come up with any ideas around what would you even do, right? Because while climate change it is mostly perpetrated by, you know, a handful of very big actors, right? I do care about it in a way that like I'm like, what could we do as a planet, right?
Yeah.
A planet full of people. And the Garfield phone beach is a small way in which we could say, okay, how did it end up there? How do we build a world where it didn't end up there? How do we build a world where we got this novelty, we got this fun, but we weren't, you know, using these plastics in this way?
Yeah.
Right.
Or even like, okay, great, I've told you this really fun story and we're all like laughing. Who do you think should be responsible for cleaning it up? Where does the responsibility lie? Because like that's a part I didn't even touch on. Tyco, the company that makes these phones, right? Like can't really be held responsible because I'm pretty sure it doesn't exist in the way that it did anymore, like that it used to. And like, who is responsible for cleaning it up when there is international ocean waste like this, right? Like that's a big part of the tension and the challenge, right? Like the UN, other international organizations have really tried to motivate people around cleaning up the great plastic garbage patch, right? Like, and there's lots of discourse about Americans in particular as consumers, as over consumers, right? So who is responsible? The people who consumed the phones, the people who were intending to purchase the phones, the people who sold the phones in the first place, the governments involved in the selling of the phones, the governments involved in making the decision that it's not worth chasing down companies for that kind of ocean waste. Like who is the cost paid towards? And like in the context of the climate crisis, when we see inaction from governments and companies, when we see that lack of moral courage, what we know is that the person who ultimately becomes responsible for doing the cleanup is these people who are one by one picking up the Garfield phones from the beach, right? Part by part, communities are caring for their beaches by cleaning up that trash where it is possible to do trash removal, right? And the people who experience trash at the volume where it's not possible to do it then must simply live with it, right? And like there's like this story has everything.
You know that I love a story about like communities like making do in difficult times, and not that like Garfield phones washing up on your beach is the most difficult thing, right? But like it's representative of ways that like communities take care of each other and protect the spaces that they live in. And I don't know, the idea that like it's indicative of a community taking care of itself is I don't know, that's meaningful to me, Matt.
Yeah.
I care about those things.
Yeah. And I think I've had different responses to this story over the years. There was one version of this story where I saw it and I was like, oh man, I really love that Garfield phone. I want one, right? There's a version of this story where I was like, the place that I want to go the most in the world to see with my own eyes is the Garfield phone beach, right? And now for me, this story is like, I can't stop thinking about this because I cannot stop thinking about it as an example of all of the other things that I have studied and tried to communicate to people in my life about this particular type of like ocean plastic garbage. I don't know.
It's a cool story.
I also love treasure. I also love beachcombing, and like on the flip side, I think like one of the genres of like TikToks that I watch a ton is the like beachcombing, mudlarking, like river stone, rock hounding, all of that kind of stuff. I love little treasure hunts, and I love the idea of this as a treasure hunt. What?
It's just funny. It's just very you.
Yeah.
I'm just laughing because it's very AC.
Correct. Yeah, that's true. I think like if you were to ever take me to a creek or a beach or whatever, like I'm the kid that's sitting in the river just looking at rocks, like not playing with anyone else.
I have a picture of you with a rock that looks like the state of Oklahoma from Lake Erie.
I have that rock. It's in the other room. It sits on my table under my lamp. I think it's a very cool rock. It looks it is. I think Matt is really underselling the degree to which the shape of that rock looks like the state of Oklahoma. It looks like
someone carved it to be the state of Oklahoma and then like threw it in a river for 20 years.
And maybe they did. We'll never know.
But also looks very naturally occurring.
Okay, I think that's pretty much like my treatise on the Garfield phone beach. Any other thoughts you'd like to add, Matt? Questions you have about the Garfield phone beach? I didn't really stop to take a breath. So
no, it's fine. I appreciate it. One of the original ideas we had to describe this podcast was a PowerPoint party. And this is absolutely an example of
PowerPoint party energy.
That kind of episode.
Yeah. Mostly I just want to point at it really vigorously and be like, do you see this thing? Do you see it? It's cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do really encourage you to read the full New York Times piece on why, the Garfield phones kept watching up on the beach. It includes some like additional just details about like locations, and like what the cost of overall, like shipping incidents is in terms of like ocean waste. In one accident alone in 2014, more than 500 containers were lost from a ship in the Bay of Biscay. So, these lost containers have long lasting effects on marine life as well as like coastal communities. And, a lot of times we hear about these stories or these accidents when the shipping containers contain, hazardous materials, but we don't usually hear about them if there is an accident and shipping containers are lost with items in them or with like non-hazardous materials in them. Or even when they're just empty, and so I don't know. I think there's something so special, so funny, so specific. Garfield is such a popular character, but it's not unique to Garfield, right? Garfield isn't the only kind of like kitschy waste that exists. And I think my takeaway is like we shouldn't only focus on waste and consumption or think about waste and consumption when we're being challenged by stories like the Garfield phone beach.
Yeah. Well, shall we do our sign off?
Yeah.
Let's do it. Sorry, I just got to say that there's probably going to be a really gnarly edit right on there because I had to take a work call.
No, I think I really crushed it. I feel very confident. And I left you a little note in my local recording.
Good. I will check that. If it's funny, it might be the tag. But yeah, anyway, this is actually, to go back to the programming that we talked about at the beginning of the show, this is one of the reasons that we need to take a little bit of a break because things are real busy and I had to stop here and take a work call. So anyway, I appreciate you finally informing me on what Garfield Phone Beach is.
Now you know.
Now I know. Hey, AC, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me at acfacci.com. You can find me at acfacci.com, a website I built specifically for this show.
Yes, and you can find me at matthorton.live, a website that recently got an update.
Ooh.
I put out a video about the video game Yakuza Like a Dragon, and the written version is on that site.
Yakuza! Sorry.
That's very much the energy of these video games, but also like goofy and silly and enjoyable. I just really shocked how much I like them. I thought it was going to be like really grossly over masculine, and it's not that. I mean, it is that,
Hell
but
yeah.
it's not that.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, you can find the show at can'tletitgo.gay and on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at the same place. Again, thanks to The Worst Garbage. I feel like it's been really nice for us lately because we've been kind of really active as a group, doing things together, which makes me really excited. You can find the network at theworstgarbage.online and join us in the Discord, which you can find at all of those websites and the Can't Let It Go channel, where we will be teasing our next episode. What I'll tell you is it's not the Traitors, but we are going to talk about the Traitors.
We will. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're wondering like, hey, where's AC and Matt's season 2 conversation? It'll be a part of that episode for sure.
Yeah.
But we've got big plans for the episode. Some really cool guests. And I'm very excited for it.
Yeah, I'm very excited too.
Thank you to Scout for our art as always. Go pay her to make some art at ko-fi.com/humblegoat. And thanks to @pragmatism on Twitter for our music. And we'll talk to y'all next time.
Talk to you next time. Bye.
TWG, The Worst Garbage, online.
Matt can't hear this, but I just want to say it's personal growth that I haven't been singing The Girl from Ipanema this whole time.